Welcome to the lesson on personal protective equipment. Upon completion of this lesson, learners will be able to understand the importance and use of personal protective equipment, also known as PPE. Learners will also be able to discuss the safety functions and justify the selection of PPE for a particular work environment. Industrial workers are vulnerable to different health and safety hazards because of the nature of their work. Although industries have implemented various health and safety programs to protect their workers from hazardous materials and situations, there are still situations where the safety hazards cannot be fully eliminated. What do you do then? This is where the use of personal protective equipment, commonly known as PP, is important. Personal protective equipment is the equipment worn to minimize a person's exposure to a variety of hazards. PP functions as a barrier between the worker and the hazardous environment in the workplace. Some potential hazards include chemical or metal splash that can cause injuries to eyes and face, falling or flying objects in the workplace that can cause injuries to head, and inhaling dust or harmful vapors which may cause respiratory problems. Both employers and employees must work together to ensure each worker is safe. To do so, workers should follow these guidelines for proper PPE use. Always wear the appropriate protective equipment in the workplace. Select the equipment that is best suited for the hazards in your work environment. Know how to clean and maintain your protective equipment, and notify your supervisor if you need to replace or repair a piece of your protective equipment. Proper selection of personal protective equipment is very important to worker safety. No single PPE can protect a worker from all potential hazards, so instead, the appropriate equipment must be selected and provided to the worker to protect them from hazards. There are different types of PPE at the workplace, such as hearing, head, eye, respiratory, and other types. We will discuss more about these types in the upcoming slides. The first type of protective equipment we will discuss is hearing protection. Noise is a common element in any industrial workplace due to the operations of machines. This noise level can cause hearing problems and even hearing loss if proper hearing protection is not worn. The strength of the noise and the length of exposure to the noise determine if the hearing loss is temporary or permanent. The selection of hearing protection should be based on the level of noise exposure the worker will experience and the capabilities of the hearing protection to reduce noise. Almost all hearing protectors will have a label that indicates their noise reduction rating, abbreviated as NRR, which is the amount of noise the protector can reduce in decibels. The units used to measure sound intensity. The greater the noise reduction rating, the better the noise reduction, hence, it offers better protection. Some commonly used hearing protectors include circumoral headphones, also called earmuffs, oral inserts, also known as earplugs, supraoral protectors that seal the external opening of the ear with rubber-like material held in place by a headband and a combination of muffs and plugs. Earplugs must be inserted properly for maximum protection and replaced when they are no longer pliable or if dirt or wax has accumulated on the earplugs. Almost all hearing protectors will have a label that indicates their noise reduction rating. Remember, NRR is the amount of noise the protector should reduce in decibels. It is important to note, though, that the real capabilities of hearing protectors can be 50% or less than the marked NRR values. This occurs for two primary reasons. First, the manufacturers do not use the A-weighted sound level scale to determine the NRR, and second, to allow for inconsistencies in the human ear canal. Because of these inconsistencies, a worker should carefully read the labels of hearing protection before choosing their protective equipment. OSHA suggests that hearing protection users reduce the manufacturer's NRR when determining which type of protection to use. The next personal protective equipment is head protection. Whether at home or work, head injuries are common. Head injuries typically occur because of falling or flying objects in the workplace or by bumping into objects such as exposed electrical conductors or low-hanging obstructions. A worker's hair could get entangled in machinery, and this can cause serious injuries and pain. Workers must wear helmets, bump caps, or hair nets to prevent such injuries. Different classes of helmets are available in the market as defined by the American National Standards Institute. OSHA standards for head protection require that workers wear helmets that meet ANSI standards. Hard hats are classified based on their function, and ANSI helmet classification labels can be found inside the helmet. Class G is designed for general use, mainly to protect the head from the impact of falling objects. These hard hats are made with non-conductive materials, protecting against electric shock from low-voltage conductors. Class E is designed to protect the head from the impact of falling objects and electric shock from high-voltage conductors. Class C is designed to protect the head from the impact of falling objects. These are made with conductive materials and hence will not provide protection against electrical shock. However, they protect the head against impacts and penetrations. It is important to note that bump caps are not considered helmets, and their primary function is to protect the worker's head from injuries that can result from bumping their heads on stationary objects. The third personal protective equipment is eye protection. Certain jobs and industries require workers to wear safety glasses to protect their eyes from potential injuries. Eye protection is important in operations that produce sparks, molten metal, chips, flying objects and particles, liquid chemicals, airborne dust, vapors and gases, or ultraviolet radiation. Workers must use additional face protection when working with corrosive and dangerous chemicals and eye protection devices. Devices that protect the eyes include glasses with side shields, face shields, goggles, and welding helmets. Keep in mind that contact lenses are not an eye protection device. Goggles are like safety glasses, except they provide a tighter fit to give greater eye protection. Also, goggles with side shields are helpful when working with machinery such as a grinding wheel, where small debris may enter the worker's eyes. The next personal protective equipment is respiratory protection. Airborne contaminants in a work environment can cause health hazards. Workers should wear respiratory protection devices if they are exposed to such contaminants in a working environment. There are 4 categories of airborne contaminants. First, the particulate contaminants are composed of tiny solid particles or liquid droplets of certain substances. Some examples include dust and metal particles. Second, the gaseous contaminants include gases and vapors that may be present in the work environment. Some common examples are carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, helium, hydrogen, and paint thinners. Third, the combination of contaminants, which are a combination of both gaseous and particulate contaminants, such as paint mist. And lastly, fourth, oxygen-deficient work environments. In these work environments, there is not enough oxygen in the atmosphere for workers to breathe. OSHA defines an environment as oxygen-deficient if it contains less than 19.5% oxygen. An example of this environment would be a very poorly ventilated area, such as a confined space. Respiratory devices can be classified into 2 main categories: air-supplying respirators and air-purifying respirators. Selecting a particular respirator depends on the type of potential hazard in the work environment. We will discuss these in greater detail in the upcoming slides. Respiratory devices can be classified into 2 main categories: air-supplying respirators and air-purifying respirators. Selecting a particular respirator depends on the type of the potential hazard in the work environment. Air-supplying respirators are used in situations where there is less oxygen content. There are 2 categories of air-supplying respirators as well: self-contained breathing apparatus, abbreviated as SCBA, and supplied air respirators. SCBA and supplied air respirators differ in how they receive air to supply it to the worker. SCBA respirators have a compressed cylinder or an air tank that the user carries on a backpack and is portable, whereas supplied air respirators get air by means of an airline. On the other hand, air-purifying respirators remove particulate and gaseous contaminants from the work atmosphere. There are 3 types of air-purifying respirators. These are mechanical filter respirators, chemical cartridge respirators, and gas masks. We will discuss these types in detail in the upcoming slides. Mechanical filter respirators work by retaining particulate matter when contaminated air is passed through the filter material. Wool is a commonly used filter material. Another type of respirator are chemical cartridge respirators, which use cartridges or canisters carrying a material that absorbs the contaminants as they pass through it. These cartridges have an expiration date, after which the worker should stop using them. The cartridges also have color codes assigned to them based on the contaminants that they can absorb. The table here shows the colors associated with different types of contaminants. For example, a blue-coated canister can be used to absorb carbon monoxide. It is important to remember that chemical cartridge respirators have limitations on their use. You should not use a chemical cartridge respirator in an oxygen-deficient work environment or in an environment where the specific type of chemical cartridge cannot absorb the contaminants. The commonly available air purifying respirators are listed here. These include dust masks, which protect against airborne particles like dust, pollen, and other small particles. Gas masks protect against toxic gases and chemicals in the air. Half masks cover the nose and mouth, protecting them from particles and some vapors. Full masks cover the entire face, protecting it from particles, vapors, and gases. In addition to head and face protection equipment, certain other PPE can be used to protect a worker's body parts from hazardous environments, such as footwear, protective clothing, and gloves. Protective footwear should be worn if there are potential hazards such as protruding nails, contact with wet materials, falling or rolling objects, and slippery surfaces. Also, leather shoes effectively protect a welder's feet from stray drops of molten metal. Steel toe boots are recommended for workers at risk of falling heavy objects in the workplace. To protect a worker's body from exposure to fire or extreme heat, thermal protective clothing can be worn. Thermal protective clothing is made up of heat-resistant material that keeps the worker from being burned. Chemical protective clothing can also protect workers from contact with corrosive or toxic chemicals. Chemical protective clothing is typically made up of materials such as rubber or vinyl. To protect a worker's hands, protective gloves should be worn. Protective gloves are available in a variety of types, which include chemical-resistant gloves, Kevlar, cut-resistant gloves, and specialty gloves for specific jobs. A worker should select gloves that fit their hands well. They should inspect their gloves each time they use them and properly maintain and clean them. If your gloves become damaged or contaminated, you should dispose of them and get another pair. Certain industrial jobs require workers to enter confined spaces for cleaning, repair, or maintenance. Workers should wear appropriate PPE, such as proper harnesses and gas monitors, before entering because these spaces are not designed for continuous occupancy. Major hazards that can occur inside a confined space are respiratory hazards and mechanical hazards, such as the worker getting trapped in silos, hopper feeders, and storage bins, or the worker being captured or surrounded by materials, such as sand or grain. Safety measures that should be taken before entering a confined space are to remove any liquid from the confined space, particularly ones that release toxic vapors, and close off all valves that could deliver toxic liquid to the confined space. In summary, industrial workers face various health and safety risks that require appropriate personal protective equipment. A comprehensive PPE setup includes hearing protection through earplugs and earmuffs to prevent noise-induced hearing loss, hard hats to guard against falling objects and impacts, and eye protection via safety glasses and face shields to prevent injury from particles and chemicals. Workers also need respirators to protect against harmful airborne substances, protective clothing to shield against chemical exposure and physical hazards, and specialized equipment like gas monitors and harnesses when working in confined spaces.